back. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.
Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Yes, I'm stuck in the middle with you.
You can count on Dwayne to come up with a clever song, Stuck in the Middle with You. But the wax is stuck in the outer ear, not the middle ear. Well done. We are talking about hearing in your ears. So we have Dr. Ted Venema here, Next Gen Hearing with locations from the island to the interior, as you mentioned, right? And we're going to talk about how you can, help resolve some hearing loss. But before the break, we were talking about the outer and middle ear. I have a question for you. Why is your ear shaped the way it is on the outside?
Good question, Zach. The outer ear has a weird shape with those weird little bumps. And then the ear canal is an inch long. Now, if you think of a wine glass that at Christmas, when you lick your finger and you go around the rim,
goes,
well, that's called, the glass is resonating.
Sure.
Well, guess what? Your outer ear, being the shape that it is, resonates with specific pitches. And that's important because in speech, it's the high-pitched consonants, the letters like sh, s, f, t, f, t, h, k, S, C, H, ch, ch, as in church. All those high-pitched sounds are necessary for telling what a word is. Did they say dishes or fishes? Did they say hat, fat, cat, sat? Okay, all of them.
Spat, yeah.
They all have, spat. They all have but it's the high-pitched that makes the words different from each other.
Right.
So, the outer ear happens to resonate with high pitches, which naturally increases your audibility of those all-important high-pitched consonants in speech. And it's those consonants that tell you what the word is. Not that the word is spoken, but what is it?
Now, I've got an interesting question for you. That's English. In a language like Japanese, where they talk, the men, they kind of like, I interact with Japanese engineers once in a while, and they have a very different kind of language.
Yeah.
So is it the same across the world?
Quite a bit the same. Yeah. It is. Now, Chinese is more tonal than English is, but nonetheless, all languages have sound made by your throat, your voice, and your lips and tongue, which all languages have a fusion of that.
There's a commonality.
There's a commonality there. And the outer ear is shaped so as to resonate precisely with the pitches of those, the high-pitched lip and tongue sounds. And it's those sounds that tell you what a word is.
So that's when you get into trouble with grandma or whoever, and she's not hearing exactly what she knows you're talking, but not exactly what you're saying.
And trouble with her isn't her outer ear. She's got inner ear problems, which we'll talk about next.
All right.
But that outer ear is a natural amplification device. And chances are, if we as a race of people didn't speak, our ears wouldn't be shaped the way they are. That's one. And the middle ear, why do you have the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup? Why do you have those little bones? Why do you have that little room? And you can think of that as that helps increase sound loudness. And how does it do that? Because the cochlea, your inner ear, is filled with fluid. Now, an airborne sound isn't going to enter water. I mean, if you have your head under a swimming pool and I'm talking to you from outside the pool, you're not going to hear a word I say.
You just hear, whoa.
Yeah, exactly. So the middle ear helps airborne sound puncture or get into the inner ear where it's got to go. And how does it do that? The eardrum is kind of big, and what listeners should do is press your hand, open your palm, and press it really hard against your cheek, and feel the pressure. Now stop. And now with the same force, push your fingertip into your cheek, and it hurts. And that's what your middle ear does. The eardrum is pretty...
The analogy we talked about the last time you were here, for women will relate to this. You wear flat shoes, and then you wear a stiletto heel.
There you go.
So the weight of your body is transferred to the floor on a flat shoe across a broad area.
That's correct.
A stiletto heel is putting all that weight on a little spike, right?
Exactly. I'd rather be stepped on by a flat shoe than a stiletto.
But the stiletto is going to get the point across.
Exactly.
And that's the analogy, I think.
Exactly. And so the stirrup, that last little bone, That's the stiletto heel you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's telegraphing that
taken,
information down to a small point.
Yep, the eardrum is the flat shoe,
right,
and the stirrup bone is the stiletto heel you're talking about. So over a big area, you're converging all that force onto a tiny area, and that increases the pressure. And that's how airborne sound can get into a fluid-filled inner ear. That's why you've got a middle ear.
Okay.
Weird, huh?
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. Now, you've been doing this for a long time. Does the ear still fascinate you?
It does. I find it an unsung sense. It's people know about the eye and the eyeball and glasses and prescription lenses and bifocals and contact lenses, but the ear is quiet. You can't see hearing loss. And so people underestimate it and they sweep it under the carpet. It doesn't get the focus of attention. And yet, look at us baby boomers. We're now becoming the biggest bulge of the population. And guess what you get with age? Hearing loss.
Well, I was over at a family dinner just the other day with my mother-in-law, and, she has, to her credit, gone and received a prescription for hearing aids and has fitted with them now. And we were at a table of 6 or 7 of us, all talking, glasses clanging and cutlery, and that's where you get into the trouble with the group. And she was right in the conversation, and before there was a lot of, huh? What?
Exactly.
Repeat. And so that frustration that you have with a family member, as you said, it affects everybody.
It does.
It doesn't just affect the person with the hearing problem. It affects,
that's correct.
We've all got to repeat. We've all got to, and try and keep that person into the mix, right?
And and hearing loss is known to aggravate cognitive decline. I mean, people isolated by hearing loss, not interacting in the game of life. And what's going to happen to someone who's already aged and on the verge of cognitive decline? Well, that isolation isn't going to do you any good.
It's interesting you mentioned that. My stepmother is the editor of Medscape.
Oh yeah.
One of the it's for physicians. If you ever search for anything online, you find WebMD, right? Yep. She's on the clinical side for physicians, Medscape. So she does psychiatry and all of the issues with the brain. And they have done studies and shown that people who have hearing loss, it helps the progression of Alzheimer's disease.
And if you're wearing hearing aids, which are now keeping you more into conversation and active with engaging with other people, that can really stem the tide.
And that's what the other part of the conversation. She said they've shown that if you get hearing aids, that it really can slow down the progression of the disease.
Yep. Now, you were mentioning, we'll talk about the inner ear in later, but the outer and middle ear, when they get problematic, for whatever reason, children with ear infections, wax in the ear, outer and middle ear pathology or problems cause conductive hearing loss, which acts like a plug in your ear. And when you look across the pitches from bass to mid to treble, a plug is going to block all of them fairly equally. So it's really the way when we wear earplugs because we're mowing the lawn, when we wear earplugs to protect ourselves from noise, we are giving ourselves a conductive hearing loss on purpose.
Sure.
We want that hearing loss because otherwise sound's going to ruin your hearing. So
across the spectrum.
Yep, across the spectrum. So that's what earplugs are. When you think of outer or middle ear problems, think of an earplug. The result is just like putting a plug in your ear. It blocks all the pitches quite evenly. They call that hearing loss flat.
Sure.
Same for bass, same for treble.
Now, what kind of corrections are there that you can have in the medical spectrum to help with outer and middle ear problems?
Well, you talked about tubes in the child's ear. That's one. Antibiotics, tonsillectomies are becoming more popular again. And, of course, a nurse or some practitioner, a hearing instrument specialist or audiologist that removes earwax. Earwax is an easy one to fix. And middle ear pathology, usually it's antibiotics, tubes in the ear canal, or tonsillectomy.
Why tonsillectomy?
Because your tonsils are surrounding the opening of those eustachian tubes that we talked about.
And your tonsils are designed to the first line of defense for bacteria getting into your body, right?
Yeah, they absorb bacteria.
Right.
And sometimes, though, they become so plugged with it that they're storing that bacteria. And now they're becoming inflamed and infected, and they're because they're swollen, they're blocking that eustachian tube from opening. And when you block that tube from opening, your middle ear space, that little sugar cube room with the 3 tiny bones in it, that room gets angry because it's getting no new oxygen. And it starts to get a vacuum in there because little capillaries that line the edges of it are absorbing oxygen. And that room, that little middle ear space is crying out for new air, and you can't get it. And so now the eardrum is sucked back, and the child says, "Mommy, my ear hurts." And then fluid begins to build behind the eardrum now. And instead of a vacuum, now you've got a bulging like your cheeks are, and it's filled with fluid. And now the fluid gets infected, turns white into pus, and Houston, we've got a problem. So get to a physician, get treated, because ear infections like that can have bad results, and it's fixable.
Okay. The show is called Boomer Life.
Yep.
We have, I'm sure, a lot of parents and grandparents hearing this about children. That makes common sense.
Yep.
Do these things ever manifest in grown-ups? Like, is there might be somebody listening now who says, well, I still get recurring problems.
Yep, and there are. Some people are just more genetically disposed to getting middle ear problems.
And you're saying that's because of the geometry of this eustachian tube. Theirs might be on more of a horizontal angle than a vertical angle.
Could be. Yep.
And is there any kind of race that suffers from this more, like with different shapes of heads, or is it pretty uniform?
You know, middle ear infections are rampant in the First Nations populations up north.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's really, that can be very, very problematic. But other than that, I don't know. It seems to be fairly consistent. It's just when you paint with broad strokes, children are more susceptible to middle ear pathology. Doesn't mean adults never get it, but in the big picture, the general trend is you usually grow out of it.
All right. Now we're going to get into the part that is going to affect the baby boomers.
Exactly.
And that is the inner ear and hearing loss. When we come back on Boomer Life on CL 650.